Hi guys, the days are getting short and dark and cold and wet, here in the northern hemisphere at least, so I thought that this would be a good time to recommend some funny books. I have picked the 5 books that I remember as the books that have made me laugh the most over the years. They are in order from least favorite to funniest: Fool on the Hill by Matt Ruff, The War of the Flowers by Ted Williams, Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman, A Case of Exploding Mangoes by Mohammed, and To Say Nothing of the Dog by Connie Willis. One of them is not like the others, can you tell? Disclaimer: the first 3 books I read long enough ago that I cannot be sure that the present me would find them as funny as I did back when I read them. But I figured that there must be some people out there who are like me when I was in my early 20s, so it doesn't hurt to mention these books, does it? So Fool on the Hill by Matt Ruff is a campus novel, but one with a hell of a lot of fantastical elements. You could also say it's an urban fantasy set on a campus. A very real campus, Cornell University in New York, in the 1970s, or at least that's what it feels like and what I remember. But in that small world, in that very contained suburban setting, a whole epic fantasy tale of love, revenge, the struggle for power, and the quest for truth takes place. And within that we get pixies, talking cats and dogs, ancient heroes and demigods, characters from Shakespearean plays, and of course a dragon. It's just full of silly whimsy. A word of caution though, the protagonist is a bit of an idiot when it comes to women. But it is his behavior and his attempts at flirting that are criticized or ridiculed by the book, while his somewhat inane ideas about women remain largely unchallenged, if I remember correctly. And also the men-to-women ratio among the significant characters and the agents of the story is somewhat skewed, let's put it that way. I've been wondering for a while if I would hate the book for that if I read it nowadays, now that I've become more sensitive to things like that. If you have read this book, I would very much like to hear what you think about this aspect. The War of the Flowers by Ted Williams was the first steampunk fantasy that I ever read, and it is to this day the only one that I have ever really enjoyed. It is a portal fantasy in which the protagonist finds himself in the middle of a political scheme and intrigue in the power struggle between the ruling houses of Fairy, who are all named after flowers, hence the title. It is just wonderfully silly and absurd and full of strange magical creatures and apparatuses, and it is about a fairy that is slightly more technologically advanced than we are used to seeing. Side note, a funny thing of a different kind is the cover image. This is Cologne Cathedral with the railway bridge over the River Rhine in front of it. So for me, this is about as far from a fantastical place as you can get. This copy is only a cheap mass market paperback edition, but for me it is quite valuable because I got it signed by the author after reading back in 2004. Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman is far less straight up a comedy than the other 2, but the premise is in itself quite amusing. In this book, the protagonist unwittingly stumbles into London below, a whole underground world underneath our normal world, and he goes through quite a steep learning curve with the rules and politics of that strange and fantastical world while he stumbles along with the second female protagonist of the book, who is quite a big deal in this world and is trying to save it from factions and powers that are up to no good. Gaiman here turns the world upside down by inventing a whole new London in which things appear ever so slightly different from our normal London. Names of streets and boroughs and tube stations are interpreted literally or in other ways different from the usual way, and things and issues of the real London are exaggerated, which of course also makes fun of London above. The book isn't first and foremost a comedy, but it is amusing throughout, not least because the main character is quite a buffoon in London above, and then in London below he is clumsy and clueless, and he gets put in his place all the time by the girl character, which is very satisfying to read. There are parts where it made me laugh out loud. I remember vividly a scene that I read on a train, a full rush hour train, and I just couldn't stop snickering for 15 minutes after. It was quite embarrassing. A Case of Exploding Mangoes is the one that is not like the others. It is political satire at its finest. It is a fictionalization of the actual event of the death and possible assassination of Pakistani dictator Mohammed Zia-ul-Haq in the year 1988. Zia-ul-Haq died in a suspicious plane crash, the circumstances of which could never be satisfyingly explained. The CIA was rumored to be involved. And Mohammed Hanif now takes this event and tells us exactly what led up to the plane crash and how this plane crash was brought about and who brought it about. At the heart of the book is a personal revenge story, which gives the novel most of its emotional depth. It isn't just a funny and wonderfully absurd story, it is also a very poignant and tragic one of disenfranchisement first and foremost. I am always a bit surprised by how little known, or at least how not widely read this book is, because it was longlisted for the Booker Prize in 2008, shortlisted for the Guardian First Book Award in the same year. And oh, it is blurbed by John le Carré. If this isn't recommendation enough, I hope I am. To Say Nothing of the Dog is one of Connie Willis's Oxford time travel books. The Oxford time travel books are a fantastic loose series of books about which I should really make a serious review sometime, because they are just so good and entertaining, and I think they would appeal to a far wider audience than they have at the moment. Anyhow, this is a fantasy of manners more than anything. The Oxford time travel books are set in a near future where time travel backwards in time exists, but is so complicated and dangerous to do that it is done exclusively by the history departments of universities. It is at the time at which this book is set well enough established that PhD students are given time travel projects as their PhD projects. In this case, one of the protagonists is a PhD student who committed the grave error of meddling by rescuing a kitten from drowning. And this might now lead to all kinds of other changes in future events, is in fact already leading to changes minutes after the deed is done. So now she and another PhD student are sent back in time to her Victorian drop site to put things right and put events back on their right trajectory, and also to accomplish one of the original purposes of her trip, to find out what the hell the bishop's bird stump is that appears in several documents of the bishop's family. The title of the book is, of course, a nod to Jerome K. Jerome's novella Three Men in a Boat, To Say Nothing of the Dog. And there is also a recurring interlude in this book in which two Oxford dons are arguing about the Magna Carta in a boat on the Thames. This is hands down the funniest book I've ever read. I have lost count of the number of times that I had to put this book down and take a laughing break. So I hope that this has been some inspiration for some comic relief for the darker days, or for some light summer reading if you are on the other side of the world. If you have read any of these books, please do let me know in the comments if you found them as funny as I did. Bye!